Good afternoon, Chuck.
Hi.
Good to see you, my
You too,
friend.
Michelle.
My new friend. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful to have met you. Thanks for joining me on Michelle's Conversations That Matter. We're going to talk about a really important topic today. I love the fact that I got to meet you and that we are going to talk about this because I am sort of like that person who wants to shine a light on things that maybe are not popular or sexy, but are necessary to kind of ground us in reality. So thank you for what you're doing and for being here today. So before we dive in, we're going to talk about closing the health and wellness gaps and inclusion conversation that I think is going to be very interesting for people. But before we do, just a little bit about the series. I created Michelle's Conversations That Matter to generally elevate the conversation around mental health and well-being, to educate people, inspire people, and really just elevate the whole topic of mental and emotional well-being. So I'm really glad that you're here. What I do professionally is I work with organizations to bring compassion and resilience to the workplace and empower employees to stay engaged and feel good about themselves, and then also remove stigma in the workplace for people with invisible disabilities. So that's what I do. Could you take a second, just introduce yourself to the audience, Chuck, who you are, where you live, and what you do?
Sure, you bet. And thank you so much, Michelle. Ever since we first spoke, I've been looking forward to this. It's you know how passionate I am about the topic, and any platform is so much appreciated. So I'm excited about today. Yeah, sure. So I'm Chuck Privitera. I live in Bergen County, New Jersey. I was born and raised just outside of Buffalo, New York, and moved to the New York City area and to New York City in 2003. My entire career, I have been a retirement plan consultant, and that means that I serve companies. Companies would hire someone like me to help them oversee their 401k plan. So that type of work never really gets involved with individuals or individual employees, but the companies are required to have some oversight, because when they're picking funds and things like that in their 401k plan, they're handling other people's money, so they hire folks like me. But through that work, through my entire career, while that's important work, I always kind of ran from the idea that I was in financial services, because I always thought to myself, there's not a lot of value in this business. There's a lot of people that help people with money make more of it. That's the easiest job in financial services, by the way. But there's not a lot of people helping people that don't have money and have real money problems. And for a long time, it's been, sort of kind of, let's just walk away from that conversation. That's, maybe they shouldn't be participating in the 401k plan, or maybe they shouldn't be worrying about asset allocation. And then, that just didn't sit well with me. So over the last few years, I've been on this journey of trying to uncover issues in financial wellness or financial stress.
Mm-hmm.
Things that, we talk about the 401k in the workplace. We have employees with problems that they can't even think about the 401k plan. They're having a hard time meeting their monthly obligations. And as I started to peel back this onion, as you know, I started to uncover some very uncomfortable things about the fact of who saves in the 401k plan at what levels. And I'm sure it won't surprise you that overwhelmingly white male across the board in terms of assets, in terms of percentages, in terms of dollar amounts. And so I know we're going to dig into that, but that's the kind of work that I'm doing. I'm helping companies take a look at why this is important, why they want to be more inclusive with their benefits, and be more thoughtful about who their conversations are pointed to when it comes to benefits. And I guess, we'll kind of go from there, right?
Yeah. So Chuck, educate us a little bit. Like, you've identified the gap. So talk to us about what is this gap that you've identified, and why do you think that this has been a sort of not addressed?
Sure. So it's interesting. Not too long ago, about maybe 6 years ago or so, I was working with a client that had asked me about a specific benefit, a student loan repayment plan. And at the time, companies were all about using this benefit to attract millennials. It was the shiny new toy. And there was a lot of reasons why it wasn't something, as an organization or as a consultant, you wanted to rush into. There's a lot of roadblocks to offering this benefit. So I was actually throwing a little shade on it for this particular client. They said to me, well, we've got some other motives here. We were concerned that at our company, it's very likely that our employees that are overburdened with student loan debt are people of color or women. And and that came from our diversity committee. And they said, as a result of that, they were worried that those folks wouldn't be able to contribute to the 401k plan on a meaningful level because of their student loan debt. And then as such, they were worried that they weren't benefiting from the match, which is part of their total compensation, total rewards package that this company is. And so I was on the edge of my seat, and they had done the work, and they said, and in fact, it's correct. We had a diversity problem directly related to our 401k plan because of other issues. And so once I heard that, I rolled up my sleeves and I was like, this can't be it. And so I started going to the large financial institutions, the ones that do, the biggest players that you would know. And I said, hey, have you guys ever even looked at this? And this has always been my sort of my tacit sort of entry into this is like, let's not finger point. Let's not talk about all the bad things that are happening, but let's just figure out, has anybody ever looked at this? And so I started getting some data around 2018 that started showing some staggering differences in white men save double what women save in the 401k plan. And then I knew that whenever you see a difference in gender, you're going to see issues with race. And so then I went on to a couple other companies, and anybody know why? And anecdotally, I was able to look at brochures and engagement material, and you see the picture of the pretty white silver-haired couple at the ski resort, and you're like, well, who has this ever been talking to anyway? And then, one of the bigger financial institutions said, well, we think we nailed down part of it. Is we surveyed employees about what's most important to them from a savings priority. What's their number one savings priority? And there was only one group of employees that said retirement was number one, and that was white men. And the answers varied for Black Americans, Brown Americans, LGBTQ plus, Asian Americans, all had different savings priorities as number one than retirement. And so here we are in this world where we invite employees to come to our workplaces and spend most of their lives, and we only offer a benefit that's really catering to one group, and haven't really given much thought to what the other groups of people are interested in. So
that's amazing. And so it's probably not very popular for you to be raising this, and you're a white man. So how's that been going?
So, so let's talk about the financial services industry. It's an old white guy business. And even worse, it's a legacy business. There's a lot of sons that go into their father's business. So it just continues to sort of perpetuate that. And so the conversation that I have has always been, look, it's the way we're paid, and not me specifically, but the industry is paid based on assets under management. They're paid based on products that they sell. So there's not a lot of money to be made with the lower income employees. And there's actually an acronym that people are referring to those employees as lower middle income, LMI. And so, and there's there's just not the ability for sort of the white guys to relate to a lot of other folks that are left behind in the financial services industry. So that part of the conversation is not popular. But when I do have these conversations with companies, they say, look, this isn't don't worry about that. What you need to worry about as an organization is why this is important to address these issues. And I've had companies, some come to me and say, look, I know that there's an employee of mine that sleeps in their car in our parking lot, and I can't pay that person more money, but they need help. And there's only one place they're going to be able to get it, and that's through their employer. And so the conversation is, first of all, if you just want to be you want to be a better employer, you don't want that employee leaving for a quarter an hour, and that's not going to solve their problems anyway. But then on the diversity side, if you have spent a lot of blood and treasure, which companies are doing now, on getting diversity right. And I've had these conversations with some of the top diversity people in the New York metro area. And of course, Michelle, it came from this, hey, look, I don't want to be the white guy causing the problems here. And they said, no, what you're addressing is an inclusion issue. And the deal is companies are spending all this money trying to hire and promote the right talent. And they don't want them walking in the door and saying, well, I only see a benefit plan here that's set up for old white guys. And so you don't want them walking out the door based on these, sort of death by 1,000 cuts, like all these little micro things that add up to big issues. And so, I've become a bit of a disruptor in the financial services world as far as that goes.
So what gets you fired up about being a disruptor? I mean, it's definitely the right thing to do, to raise this up and say, you're missing a very large portion of your population in terms of supporting them financially, like from a financial strategy perspective. But like, what fires you up about this? That you're like, I get the sense you're like a dog with a bone. You're like, I'm not going to let this go. This is too important, and it has to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that question, and I think you and I spoke briefly in the green room, and maybe this ties back to the last question you asked about me being a white guy, an old white guy, and yeah, I'm part of a system that's part of the problem, and the earliest sort of forays into this, you're like, well, who am I to do anything about this? And the answer is actually, I'm someone with power and privilege because of my gender and my race. And I also have an expertise now in this. Yeah. So it's incumbent upon me to lift others up in this world. And there's a couple things that I want to share around that. So what I mean by that is I have the power and privilege to make this, to shine a light on this, but also to do the work and to point out that there's work that can be done to make these conversations better. And so at first I was like, okay, let's help put together financial wellness benefits that help equalize benefits in the workplace. But then I thought, especially after 2020 and a lot of the things that we were exposed to in 2020, I thought, wait, we can actually start to close the health and wealth gaps by being more thoughtful about our benefits. And so that means there's a study by McKinsey that so McKinsey said, look, the financial services system in the United States is not inclusive. And if we were to make it more inclusive, it would add 4 to 6% to the GDP of our country. Now, Michelle, for a small mind like mine, it's hard to really get my arms around that. But I can tell you this, every single American in the United States would benefit tremendously from that kind of a bump in GDP. And so this goes back to where I say to myself, okay, if you can't get behind trying to help others, at least you can get behind the fact that when we are more inclusive, it helps everybody. It's going to help you and me and everyone else. And so that's what gets me going, is to get people to understand that this isn't about taking away from a white guy to help a black guy. This is about me using what I have to help other folks, and that will help me.
Right.
So it's a little selfish.
So, but a mindset around saving. I mean, you either have a mind around saving, or you grew up in an environment where saving was secondary because you were in survival mode, right?
Yeah. So I love this sort of part of the conversation, because that is so true. There's a million different factors. I mean, in my house, it was my father was in financial services. You talked about this all the time. You get your first job and you put money in the 401k plan, and that's not the case. And I have a friend who I always refer to, my friend Lawrence, who he was my trainer at the gym, and he's about 20 years younger than me. He's a black guy, and he had a very different upbringing than I did. He was his mother took her life when he was 12. He was in 4 different homes in high school that he either lived in or stayed in. And yet he's contributing 12% to his 401k plan. And when I found that out, when he told me, I said, tell me why. And he said, when you grow up the way I did, you view this as an opportunity to provide yourself with a safety net that you never had. And I immediately thought to myself, wouldn't that be terrific if the big financial institutions, instead of showing pictures of golf carts and lake houses and mountain vacations, showed pictures of or messaging around safety net and things that would resonate with so many more people. And so, I
was just going to say, and that ties into overall well-being, right? We talked a little bit about this before we were in the green room about what is well-being and what are the stresses and strains that play on well-being, and finance is got to be one of the biggest ones, I think you mentioned. And like just the safety net versus not living paycheck to paycheck and stressed about, oh my goodness, what if something happens and my children and my, I'm a single parent, like all of those burdens play into overall mental health.
Yeah. And so let me talk quickly about financial wellness, then I'll get into that emotional and physical well-being tied to financial stress. I mean, so Well, I want to be clear about one thing. I'm not saying that everybody shouldn't be thinking about retirement or saving for retirement, or that it's not at least a top 2 or 3 priority for everyone. But what I'm saying is, if you're a Black American whose number one priority is educating your children, then when I come in as your employer and say you need to be saving 12% in your 401k plan, we're really off to a bad start with that conversation. Yeah. And so it may be, just let's be more thoughtful and say, for those of you more interested in saving for a college education, we have this tool here. Also, you may want to consider contributing to the 401k plan, at least to get enough of the match or whatever. And so that's just about having more thoughtful conversations to make sure you're addressing everybody's needs. But on the well-being side, financial wellness is something I've been on top of for about 8 years now. PricewaterhouseCoopers delivers a survey every year on financial stress in the workplace. These are all pre-pandemic, but in 2019, financial stress was at its highest in the workplace, in spite of what we all were told was a booming economy. 86% of people surveyed in this deep survey reported some level of financial stress. Of those, 64% reported spending 3 hours a week at work on their difficult financial situation. And then the numbers go so deep into what this causes, from a medical claims through insomnia, depression, neck and back, high blood pressure, and everything that goes with that, emotional well-being claims. And we talk about presenteeism, where you're not focused, poor decision-making because you're stressed, absenteeism. And so the numbers start to pile up as to what it's costing the companies to have this kind of stress. Now, imagine one of the biggest problems that most Americans have, is that they just don't have enough emergency savings. Imagine how much less stressful this pandemic could have been if people had 3 or 4 months saved up for emergencies. And so, and then, as this conversation was important before 2020, as 2020 came and went, now we're hearing words like financial fragility and emotional fragility. And it's the idea that I'm one circumstance that's beyond my control away from a complete either financial ruin or emotional meltdown. And any responsible employer knows that I can't have groups of employees coming to work feeling like that. Yeah. And I need to, one thing about financial stress is it will cause emotional and physical manifestations, period. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important for employers to be thinking about this and looking at it and realizing the status of their employees. I mean, this is huge. This is huge. If you really want to be a truly diverse and inclusive organization, you got to be looking at it from multiple angles, especially, what you're sharing. So
yeah, I think from there's a friend of mine, Sheila Robinson Kiss, who does the effects of racism in the workplace on emotional well-being. And if you look at 2020 and what not only financial stress, well-being, physical well-being stress, am I going to survive COVID, or am I going to get it and survive it? And then the sort of stress of, being a Black individual in an American workplace during this social unrest. Yeah. I can't imagine the toll it's taken on, especially our Black colleagues and brothers and sisters, having all of those sort of pile on this year. And so, I'm just trying to address a little slice of that, but
yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. That's such an important aspect. It's important that you explain this the way you just did, because, when we think about the compounding effect on our well-being, it's just like you said, like one circumstance away from ruin. That's a scary place for anyone to operate from. That's scary.
It's absolutely. One of the things that I like to cover too, just when I have conversations like this, Michelle, is that people ask me, what can I do like immediately? Because I had one person say to me, an HR director, she said, Chuck, my communication materials are exactly what you say. They have pictures of all white people doing fun white things. Yeah. And she said, and I have this diverse workforce. What do I do with the other folks if I, this is a smaller company, couldn't afford to customize their materials? And I said, well, at the very least, you could set up maybe a little ERG or a little affinity group where you have some of your older, fill in the blank, but Black or brown or whichever group you're trying to engage, and and use some mentoring around that, and just storytelling around why, why, rather than rather them a packet that's not going to resonate at all, sit down with some of our older employees, some of our people that look more like you, or have this similar stories, and that has been effective. And there are certainly, engaging third parties that understand this. In fact, some of the work that I've done, has shown, surveys have shown that, a Black woman doesn't need to have a financial coach who's a Black woman. She just needs whoever she's dealing with to understand that her needs are different than a white male.
Yes.
And, and, that just saying, well, I need to be saving 12% for retirement. It's interesting. I had, there was a study done not too long ago by these two women, I think one from the University of Stanford and the other from Michigan. And they basically said, look, you can look at financial services right now like retail. And what I mean by that is retail, Amazon is a diversity conversation. That may not be why they were set up, but a lot of the reason it's so successful is because certain people got tired of walking into a local mall and not seeing anything that was there for them, or maybe seeing only one store that represented what they were there to buy. And so Amazon, by customizing and individualizing your shopping experience, is really catering to your needs. And that's a diversity conversation. And I think to my little homogenous suburban New York City street here, which I live in a very white neighborhood, but I think, my wife and I are an older couple with a younger son. Across the street, there's a couple with 4 boys from ages 10 to 20. Next to them is a couple whose kids are grown. Up the street's a single woman who decided to have a child on her own. If you're bringing the same message on saving and retirement and investing to all of us, you're falling flat.
Yeah, you're
and we're all white people on a suburban street in a similar name, similar income, all that stuff. And so imagine giving the same message to your diverse workforce. Like, it's just not, shouldn't even be a head scratcher as to why white men are saving more than anybody else in the 401k plan. So,
and then you're missing the opportunity to support your people, in some way, right? Because I'm quite sure they see the brochure and they're like, forget it, that you're not even talking to me. So I'm not even going to entertain this, let alone get the information around the value of doing some type of saving, for that nest egg or whatever. Like, you miss the boat entirely.
Absolutely. And what happens is, believe it or not, so let's talk about stress again. Let's say, and so the people that were surveyed, Latina people, they said their number one savings priority was to make sure that their monthly obligations are met. Now, imagine I'm an employee, that's my number one savings priority, and an employer comes and says, or has financial advisors come in and say, you need to be saving 10% your 401k plan. Okay, not only is that not a priority for me, but now you're stressing me out because you're telling me I'm never going to be able to retire if I don't save 10% in my 401k plan. So not only was I already stressed, just by virtue of you telling me that I need to save this much money in my 401k plan is stressing me out even more. So believe it or not, we can actually be causing more stress by not addressing exactly what their needs are.
Yeah. So unknown, not knowing that can definitely impact. The thing that you said before really resonated with me, because I talk about this a lot when it comes to mental health in the workplace and the power of an ERG. And I love it because I want to leave people with tangible things they can do. I always like to try to say, like, okay, so here's 1 or 2 things you can do. And I love that you said, fine, you can't reproduce your brochures to reflect an accurate demographic of your employees, but you can facilitate a community where they can support and learn from one another. And I think organizations underestimate the power of their people helping their people.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, totally. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And, it's always been such a secret how much you can save in your 401k. You know what? Let's get together. Let's have small groups. Let's let people talk about their financial stress and what would help them, or what type of benefit might help them through their employer. And let the employer, and as the employer, you have to listen to these things too. And I think, that would be a great idea for a lot of organizations. As I look at the title of what we're talking about today, I want to make sure I address the health side of this too, because I've had some friends that have really taken a close look at some of the work I've been doing. They've been saying, hey, if this is all accurate on the 401k side, I wonder what it's like on the medical side. And so the whole idea is if you go to like the largest 401k plan record keepers headquarters, you're going to see a lot of white people designing a lot of communication for white people, designing a lot of benefits that are geared toward what white people want. Now, I don't believe that these are inherently racist people. I don't believe these are people trying to exclude everyone. I just don't think they've looked at it or thought about it. And so on the health side, we got a very clear example of how this is true there too. And even though I'm not a consultant over there, I know enough about it to have this conversation. And, and the passing of Chadwick Boseman this year was an eye-opener for a lot of people. So I'm a 50-year-old male, and in America, at age 50, everybody tells you to get your colon cancer screenings. And your health plan, your employer is going to pay for them at age 50. And there's a reason for that. The reason is because polyps turn into stage 1, stage 2, and those things cost more. They cause more headache and heartache. They cause, more higher mortality rates. And so it's a win-win for everybody to make sure that everyone's getting their colon cancer screenings done at age 50. Except, and what was magnified by Chadwick Boseman's story is it's not the case for black men. For black men, their polyps start to metastasize closer to age 40. Now, I don't believe that people in Hartford or whatever insurance capital of the world we're talking about sat around trying to figure out how to exclude black men from this conversation. But the fact of the matter is, this particular policy that is widespread is racist because black men die at a 40% higher rate from colon cancer than white men. So now, let me ask you this. Everybody that heard this that has a self-funded plan where they can make their own change, and every almost major health plan in the country immediately moved to change from age 50 to age 40. And say, of course we're going to fix this. We just never looked at it.
Yeah.
And so that's the world I'm trying to operate from, is just trying to turn over these things that are going to save lives and create wealth for people and change lives, and say, have we ever even looked at this? And is there a better way to deal with this? And so.
Amazing. Chuck, this is so good. I applaud you for elevating this. And I hope that organizations are going to look at this more. And I hope you keep talking about it. You keep raising it up. And I feel like you should be doing way more than just talking about it. Like, is there something we can do? Can we coordinate a roundtable? I don't know. I want to help you.
Well, there's not a camera that I didn't love, Michelle, and I really can't do it without your help. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak about this important conversation.
Well, we are almost at the end of our time. Do you have anything else that you wanted to share? Any other words of wisdom? Anything else we need to know about this topic you want us to know?
No, I think it's just important to understand how much financial stress has an impact on us, but I also want to have the positive side of it too. Financial wellness, when you have your financial house in order, can also help you with other things like your physical. If you have figured out your budget and recognize you need to be a little bit more active, and I have to move this around to hire a trainer, to join a gym, and so good financial health can also help you with good emotional and physical health. And so, and it's just, add that to the mix for our diverse workforces. And, the whole idea is to raise everybody up and close the gaps in health and wealth.
I love it. Thank you so much, Chuck. Thanks for educating us today, for sharing everything that you did, for the work you're doing, for, the unpaid work you're doing, because this is all a personal passion. So my hat goes off to you. Anyone who's fighting for something and isn't doing it for personal gain, I applaud. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I, don't forget, part of it is selfish, because I realized I'm part of a system and part of a problem that I can definitely be part of a solution. So we're working on it.
Amen. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And
okay.
We will stay in touch, and I will definitely be available to support you with this. It's awesome.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I'm so grateful for this time together.
Awesome. All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.